Welcome once again to one of a series of videos we are doing with Alexander Matheson, best known to us as Sandy, a holder of many public offices during his long life. We have been talking about some of them. We're going to talk about one or two more of them today. And one of them that I would like to speak you to tell me about is the post of Honorary Sheriff. How did that come about, and what were the tasks involved?
Well, it's a very interesting position. It's not an elected position. It's not a position one applies for. In my case, I have brought for today along the warrant, which I would like to read you. And actually, it's not my own warrant, but it's the same wording as my warrant. And it begins with I, so-and-so, Esquire, KC, LLD, Sheriff of the Sheriffdom of Grampian and Highlands, considering that it is advisable to appoint an additional honorary sheriff who, and this is the point, who may give assistance from time to time in the conduct of the business of the Sheriff Court at Stornoway in the said sheriffdom, and having full, and this is the part that I rather like, and having full confidence in the character, qualifications, and fitness of Alexander Matheson, pharmacist in Stornoway, to discharge the duties of the office, do hereby, in virtue of the powers contained in my commission as Sheriff of the aforesaid, nominate, constitute, and appoint the said Alexander Matheson, Esquire, to be an honorary sheriff of the sheriffdom at Stornoway, but only at my pleasure, with full power and authority to him to exercise all the powers, privileges, and functions that may be competent to him in respect thereof. And I appoint his commission to be recorded in the book of the court for publication to the legions. Now, that sums it up. We are not legally, necessarily, we could be, but we are not necessarily legally qualified. And I, for instance, would never take a serious court case involving complicated legal arguments or anything of the sort. It is to do help, signing warrants, taking affidavits from people, and occasionally appearing on, as we say, on the bench to handle minor misdemeanors in which we can fine, sentence people to prison and so forth. But for instance, if I was called to a sheriff court, as I was on many, many occasions, if it was something that required complicated legal argument, I would not take it. It would be given to, I would merely continue the matter. And that has become even more important now, where there is no longer a resident sheriff in Stornoway as there used to be when I was commonly on the bench.
There was the district court at that time also.
Oh yes, that was, the district court was entirely different. The district court was a minor court in relation to the local authority of the area, where if you broke the local authority laws, people who did would appear before you and could be dealt with for very minor things. Probably the most common example would be yellow lines or traffic restrictions or breaking in local authority traffic laws. The commonest in my days was the misuse of lampposts for purposes for which they were not normally used. In other words, people would often relieve themselves against a lamppost, and if they were caught doing that, they would be taken to court and fined. I don't know quite what the attraction for people who had been drinking too much and lampposts was. They might just copying dogs or something. They would.
So the people got fined, but the dogs didn't.
Well, apparently not. No, I have to say I never had a dog in front of me on a Monday morning. No, but even you could break the law in relation to a dog. In those days, if the dog wasn't licensed, you could fine the owner.
How much guidance did you have or did you need in terms of dealing with these cases, in terms of guilty or not guilty, and if they were guilty, what the penalty was?
Well, there was no formal training or guidance would have been by watching the sheriff and going to the sitting in the court. But of course, the prime source of guidance for an honorary sheriff would be the sheriff clerk. In my day, it was Mrs. Margaret MacDonald, and she kept us right, quite firmly kept us right. And I remember on one occasion, I myself ran foul of the law. A minor traffic offence in which I banged into the back of a car which had foolishly stopped in front of me. It had no business to be there, and I ran into the back of it. And I had to appear in court in relation to petition about my driving, and I was fined £5 whole for careless driving. And I thought, well, this isn't very good. I better resign my commission. So I wrote to the sheriff clerk and said, to the sheriff, I wrote to the sheriff, and the sheriff principal who had appointed me in the first place wrote back and very kindly said, there is no need to resign. It's a minor matter, and more importantly than anything else, it gives you a taste of what it means to be appearing in the court, and you will be the better for seeing it from the other side.
Who dealt with you?
I can't remember. It must have been the resident sheriff in Stornoway.
You were going to tell me what Mrs. MacDonald said, were you?
Oh, in another matter, my biggest, if you want, my biggest case was in relation, and it had to do with drunk driving. A gentleman had been caught for the umpteenth time drunk in charge, but on this occasion he had absconded before he could be properly apprehended. And he did. He appeared in front of me, and I took a very firm line about drunk driving and running off and all the rest of it, and repeated drunk driving. So I thought I would make an example of him, and I sentenced him to 6 months in prison, which was quite a large penalty, but I felt the circumstances merited it. And the culprit's lawyer immediately went for what they call a stated case. In other words, he appealed, and that meant that I would have to write down my reasons and justification. And of course, that simple case had to be turned into legal language. and Mrs. MacDonald was very, very helpful, as she was meant to be, in turning it into a stated case in legal terms. It went, and the court in Edinburgh, the higher court, agreed with my sentence. But I was somewhat mystified. Within a year, the law had been changed, reducing so that no one could go to prison for 6 months just for an offence like that. The funny part of it was that the gentleman, having been dispatched to prison, I think in Edinburgh, he was a well-known gentleman round the town, and some time later that year, after he had been back home, I ran into him in, would you believe it, in a licensed premises in town. No cars this time. And I wasn't quite sure what sort of welcome I would get from him. And he looked at me and he burst out laughing. And he said, "Well, Sandy, you did me a very great favour. As you know, we've had a very, very fine summer. And I have spent the summer on the roof of Saughton Prison, getting the sun. And if you see me with a lovely tan, I can only say thank you for putting me in front of the sun all summer."
No, I'm sure there are other cases like that, but being an honorary sheriff in a small community means that you actually probably knew most of the people who were in court. How difficult was that?
It didn't cost me an awful lot because none of it was particularly serious and certainly didn't involve finer points of law and culpability and so forth. But of course, if it was someone who I knew very well and was constantly or often in the company of, I would recuse myself from taking the case. And obviously, if anyone related to me, no matter how distantly, was there, I would have had to say no, thank you. I decline to handle this case. And in some cases, of course, once I heard the evidence, whether I knew the person or not, I could say, well, this matter of such complexity or such seriousness, I remit your case to the sheriff.
Can you remember who the other honorary sheriffs in your time were?
Well, there was Billy Albert Nichol. There was Murdoch MacLeod, the town clerk. Can't really remember who.
Neil Galbraith? Neil Galbraith was later on.
Yes, Neil was an honorary sheriff. Ian Barley MacLeod.
Mrs. McCaskill?
No.
No, was she not?
Don't think she wasn't an honorary sheriff.
Okay.
She may have been on the district court.
Right.
In my time, the district court was the borough court. And it was only after the introduction of the Gore that it became the district court. Mm-hmm. Why did she ever have you to deal with?
No, no. Oh yes, she did, but not in court.
Not in court.
Yeah, so I have fond memories of her. But she was a justice of the peace. That's what she was.
Oh, that's different again.
Yeah, again.
That is a similar thing, but it deals with entirely different matters. People wanting a document signed in front of a responsible person, and a justice of the peace does that. One of the interesting things of being a justice of the peace was I actually married somebody once.
Did you?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, I can't really remember an awful lot of it, except it was in the council, in my own office, convener's office. The clerkess came to me and said, amongst your appointments this week, you will have a marriage I am married. What would I have a marriage for? So I presided over a marriage, a civil marriage, obviously, and it was just done according to the formula. I said, do you so-and-so take this so-and-so to be your wedded wife and all that sort of stuff.
Aye.
Which was quite interesting, yes.
I hope they didn't end up having to call you a so-and-so for having done it.
No, I perhaps shouldn't have said do I so-and-so, do you, Kenneth Maciver, take this charming lady to be your lawfully wedded wife? And you would get the nod and say yes.
Well, it was another former convener who actually did that to Kenneth Maciver, the Reverend Donald McCall.
Yes, but he did it with his with his full clerical authority.
In both languages.
In both languages.
Yes.
Oh, very good.
Are you still an honorary sheriff?
Yes, but I never go to the court because I'm deaf. And although some people would argue that deafness is a prime qualification for being in the court, I have to say that many years ago I had to say I cannot hear what all that has been said, and I cannot constantly be saying to witnesses, speak up, speak up, speak up. I agreed with the clerk to the court that I should no longer take court cases. I can still authenticate a signature and so forth.
So are you still available to conduct marriages?
Why do you wish to get married? Well, I haven't put it to a test recently.
I have to say, when I was editor of the Gazette at that time, it did give us material to put on the pages, which some people approved of and some people didn't approve of. And in fact, some people at that time used to say that appearing, having been at court in the Gazette, was worse than being in the court.
Yes, it's interesting the public exposure you get. I mentioned when I had a small bump with my car. What happened was I, and entirely my own fault, banged into the back of the car, which was stopped on behead, and of course got out and exchanged details with the driver of the other car. And as it happened, would you believe it, two constables were, as they say, proceeding westerly along behead when they saw what was happening, and they came over to investigate the matter, and they looked and they heard both parties, as it's said in the law books, and they sniffed the ear and looked me up and down and said, oh, well, you've exchanged details, okay, that'll be all. There was no need for us to take matters any further. And off they went. I understood later on that they went back in due course to the police station, where the desk sergeant said, anything happening tonight, boys? Oh yes, we dealt with a minor traffic accident. And what did you do? Oh, we looked him up and down and we saw that everything was satisfied, and we didn't breathalyze him, but we could see that he wasn't under the influence of drink. And the desk sergeant said, what? You didn't do anything other than what you've told me? And they said, no, there's no need for further action. And the desk sergeant said, just you wait here for a few minutes. And within 5 minutes, the phone was ringing. A concerned observer, concerned citizen had seen the whole thing and immediately phoned up the police station and complained, why is Sandy Matheson not been arrested and breathalyzed and all the rest of it? And it showed the interest that people took in these matters.
Do you believe somebody did phone?
Did I?
Did somebody phone?
Oh yes, somebody phoned the police station to complain that I had not been breathalyzed. And of course, there was genuinely no need to be breathalyzed. A, it was a minor event, and B, I manifestly was not drinking. Will that satisfy you, Your Honour?
Yes. The matter rests, Your Honour.
Yes.
Let's move on to another honour, the Lieutenancy of the Western Isles.
Right.
How did you get involved in the first place, and then talk about your appointment as Lord Lieutenant?
Well, I don't know how or why I got involved, but 1990, I had finished my term as convener, and I got a request from the then Lord Lieutenant, Lord Granville, saying that he was required to appoint another deputy lieutenant, and would I be interested in being appointed to the lieutenancy. And as I told you often before, I was never taught by my mother how to say no. So I said, well, thank you very much, I'm willing to do whatever is necessary. So he appointed me as one of his deputy lieutenants, that is, someone who would do tasks when he was not able to do it. And I became deputy lieutenant with a similar warrant to this, except it wasn't to do with criminal activities, it was to do with civic duties and standing in for him in his duties for the monarchy. So I became the deputy, and in due course, after Lord Granville had passed away, his successor appointed me as his vice lieutenant. That is just slightly above a deputy lieutenant in terms of responsibilities and duties. And in due course, when he died, this is Lord Dunrussell, when he passed away, I became interim Lord Lieutenant, and in due course, rather than get a completely new person in, they appointed me as the full Lord Lieutenant.
Who appointed you?
I was appointed by the monarch. I'm trying to remember. I had received a letter from the Prime Minister, I think it was Tony Blair, saying he was required to appoint deputy lieutenants, and he had appointed me where he had heard of me. Obviously somebody had said to him, well, there's Sandy Matheson, there's John Morrison, there's Dr. Macaulay, a whole range of local people who had been similarly appointed, and the word probably said the course no longer convener, give him something else to do, and I became the Lord, Her Majesty's Lord Lieutenant in the Western Isles in 201.
So what are the principal duties? What were the duties of the Lord Lieutenant?
Organising the activities of royal visits, presentations. One of the most pleasant things was taking the monarch's greetings to somebody who was 100 years old with the usual telegram, and you would go out and you would have a ceilidh with a lovely old cailleach or botoch and have a great little tea party. That was one of the happier things. There were lots of other duties, presentations of medals, going to various military functions. The one that was set in Aspic actually was the annual remembrance service, where I would have to go and lay the wreath and meet the other participants who were laying wreaths and to do with military matters. My lieutenancy, perhaps one of my most difficult tasks was in relation to, I was required to go to the territorial, I forget the precise name of it. It was at the time of the war in Afghanistan, and I had a monthly meeting in Inverness in relation to the activities of the army in Afghanistan. And although I wasn't deeply involved, it helped to give me a picture of the very, very, very difficult situation the British soldiers were out in Afghanistan. I had 3 or 4, half a dozen royal visits, and I must say that my time as Lord Lieutenant was made immeasurably easier because I had a most excellent clerk to the Lieutenancy, Donald Martin, who really looked after me, kept me organised, did the paperwork and so forth. And I'm very happy to say that he succeeded me and himself performed the duties for 5 years. One of the aspects of the lieutenancy was that when you're appointed in the first place, as I was in 91, 92, it is made perfectly clear to you that on your 75th birthday you go. There's no question about hanging on or anything, or you are gone. And that's what happened. Me on my 75th birthday, Donald took over from me.
Well, there was one duty which you could have had, and if I had had my way, you would have had.
Oh?
But the rest of the family overruled me, and they said I had to go to Buckingham Palace.
Oh, yes.
And in its place was the Queen herself.
Uh-huh. And the Queen was there.
Yes, it was her who presented me the medal.
Did she say, "Now, how are you today"?
Not quite.
What I found about Her Majesty was that she was remarkably knowledgeable, not just well briefed, but knowledgeable. And the last occasion that I met her was when I got my own medal, the CVO, which is her special medal. It's not like the other medals given to you through the political honour system. It's a personal recognition by Her Majesty for what you have done. And she didn't seem to be in any way fussed at meeting me. Why should she be? Except her opening remark was, "And did you have a pleasant journey down from Stornoway yesterday?" Which I thought was quite good. At an investiture, as it's called, she's dealing with 40, 50, 60 people, and there will be a temptation, which she never fell into, of just listening to what the man, the usher, said. Mr. Sandy Matheson stepped forward. She was able to take it a wee bit further, and that brought me very much back into my admiration for this wonderful lady who seemed to know exactly what to say on different occasions. And I was very moved by my final experience with her. Not that we knew it was going to be the final one, but as I often look back, I realised quite how so many people fail to understand not only the duties of the monarch, but the immense amount of care and knowledge it takes to perform duties successfully and properly.
Did anything in these years in the Lieutenancy and as Lord Lieutenant cause you to change your views about the monarchy?
Not really. Everything I did in relation to all of the royal family who I had the privilege of meeting served to make me even more certain that the kind of monarchy we had as head of state was the correct way to have a good, firm government. The monarch is never autocratic. The monarch is the servant of the people, and what the monarch does is in relation to their, not just their best interests, but as the best example of how to do things properly.
You got closer to them than most of us will, because you were Lord Lieutenant, but also they have a special affinity towards these islands because they used to come here every year, and the passenger come ashore.
That's right.
How did you find them as people?
How did I find them as people? Normal, pleasant, considerate, mannerly, and above all with this sensitivity about other people and their needs and wishes. I met the King when he was Prince Charles. I met the Princess Royal, and she was very, very naval orientated, and she came here far more than people know because she would come on one of the Royal Navy boats. She was also the patron of the Royal National Lighthouse Commission, and she would come up every summer on the Faroes, the lighthouse ship, on a tour of the various lighthouses round the British coast. And she would, as I say, she would just slip in and slip out, and people weren't any the wiser.
Last year, you had an honour conferred upon you, the freedom of the Western Isles.
Oh yes,
First of all, when you heard about this, what did you feel? But secondly, what does it mean to be a free man of the Western Isles?
What does it mean to be? Well, first of all, it's got to be said it confers no physical, financial benefit. It's purely an honour for the sake of the recognition. When I got the letter from Mr. Malcolm Burr saying that the council had decided to honour me in that way, I was absolutely gobsmacked, to use a phrase that I don't normally use, because it never ever occurred to me that I was in line for this. I had observed it from the council point of view before in relation to previous freemen when I myself was the convener and had been involved. My own knowledge of the freedom had been formed in 1961 when my granduncle, whom I so often mention, Roddy Smith, had been made a freeman of the borough of Stornoway, not the Western Isles. And my researches and interest then took me back to the very first freedom of the borough, which was in 1938, when my granduncle was the provost, and he had conducted the freedom ceremony for three eminent people, against whose record mine is minor. There was Commodore MacLean, the Commodore of the Cunard line. There was Mr. MacLeod of Ibrox, a very famous educationalist who came from Stornoway and had spent his life in education circles in Glasgow. and the other person who got it was T.B. Macaulay, of the founder, the son of the founder of the Sun Life Assurance of Canada, who was a tremendous benefactor of the island. And these three gentlemen were the first to get the freedom of the borough. And it just became something that I was interested in. So when it was my turn to be so honoured, I immediately realised that it wasn't mine honour. It was a recognition of those who had helped me throughout my political career, in particular my wife and my family. So I feel that the honour is not mine alone. The honour came, as I said at the time, from two sources. One, as I held up the borough coat of arms with the famous words, "God's providence is our inheritance." And the second was, as I pointed to my wife and family, the people who had helped me and supported me and made many sacrifices for me. So the freedom of the Western Isles is, of course, I think, the greatest honour that has been done me. But interestingly, it's not mine, it's ours.
Well, I remember Donald Stewart was made a freeman.
Yes?
I remember Reverend Donald Macaulay and
Duncan
Major, yes,
Duncan
they,
Major.
of the Western Isles. They were not of Stornoway as well.
That's right, they were in Western Isles.
Father McClellan.
Yes.
So you join a very illustrious band.
Well, indeed. And I myself presided over Donald Stewart and Chrissy Stewart's freedom, because it was unique in the sense that it was a joint freedom for the two of them, both having served in a slightly different sphere, one as the very distinguished MP, the other as a lady who had supported and helped him and done a great deal of independent ambassadorial work for the Western Isles in the House of Commons.
Now, I know someone, and he was granted the freedom of the City of London, the city part of London, and technically, apparently, he's allowed to take a flock of sheep through the city. That's one of the beneficiaries.
Oh,
have you got anything? Can you do anything like that?
Well, if you see me taking a flock of sheep through Stornoway, you will know that I'm listening to what you say and determined to emulate a gentleman in London.
That would be before they would take you away and say that Sandy Matheson has lost his marbles altogether.
Well, there is absolutely no reason why in my younger days I shouldn't have taken a flock of sheep through Stornoway, because my Uncle Roddy out at Benadrove, had 100 sheep on the farm at Benadrove. And after all the family died, I had to look after his sheep on my own for 2 or 3 years before we changed the situation at Benadrove Farm. I used to go out every morning with a little bag of whatever you fed sheep feed. And I was amazed and amused that the sheep soon got to know my car. And the minute my car came around the bend at the farm at Benadrove, I would see them all rushing down the hill to meet me, to be fed in the troughs at the bottom of the park. So even the sheep would come at my command.
Oh, well, at least the sheep would come.
Yes.
Even if nobody else did.
Well, some people didn't come, but the sheep certainly did.
Now, going back the full circle, back maybe towards the beginning, and you know your own business as a chemist in Stornoway, and this kind of thing, and the connection with the Baltic, and the Baltic book shop, and well, there's a Baltic shoe shop as well, of course. But things, apparently, there is a good reason why the name Baltic, which might seem mysterious to anybody else. Why Baltic?
Well, the Baltic came through the Baltic boot store, in that there was a gentleman called Louis Bittner, who was a Russian Jew who had, I think, been ethnically cleansed out of Russia and came to Britain towards the end of the 19th century, 1870 something or other, and he set up a whole chain of boot shoe shops associated with the herring fishing industry, and in due course he set up a shoe shop, boot shop in Stornoway. His first shop was on South Beach, where the bank is now. It used to be called the Clydesdale Bank, but it's now called Virgin Money. And his shop was there. And then later on, he rented space in my Uncle Roddy Smith's shop, and they became very friendly. And in due course, after Mr. Bittner died in 1956, his daughter sold off his various properties, and at that time his property was in the Narrows of Commerce Street, where the Baltic book shop is. And we bought that shop in property and business and shop in 1958. And in due course, we moved it on to North Beach, and then from North Beach, the shoe shop has now been closed down. But that is not the only reason I have taken the name the Baltic into the company. My great-grandfather, Uncle Roddy's father, Captain John Smith, as I told you, a distinguished citizen of the village of Braga. He used to go to the Baltic every year with salt herring from Stornoway and take back various things, mostly staves for making the barrels. And he often, as I say, he sailed to and from the Baltic as well as to the Mediterranean. He was lost in his ship in the Bay of Biscay, as I've told you before, but he too gave me a reason for calling our shops the Baltic Book Shop. Once somebody pointed out to me that we had a sign saying the Baltic Boot Shop, and because I was a mean and tight person, I only had to change the T to a K to get the book shop.
I am grateful to you, Sandy, once again for sitting here with me and discussing these things.